Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Nicole from the Nonprofit Hive, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. During today's AMA, we're talking about cultivating ideal outcomes with brand strategy, which feels very timely because a lot of nonprofits are trying to be clearer, more trusted, more visible, and more consistent, often with very little time, budget, or team capacity. And let's be honest, brand strategy can sound like one of those things that live in a fancy deck somewhere, but when it's done well, it should actually help you make better decisions, communicate more clearly, and create more trust with the people you're trying to reach. So I want to just do a few quick housekeeping notes before we jump in. This, like normal, is hosted through our StreamYard webinar series. This session is being recorded and we'll share the replay after the session. This is meant to be conversational, so please, please, please use that Q&A or chat to drop your questions as we go. Hannah will be sharing a few of the top questions she gets asked most often, and then we'll bring in some questions you submitted when you registered, and we'll make space for live questions too. So no need for perfect questions. Half form, messy, real human nonprofit questions are exactly what we're looking for. And with that, I'm really excited to welcome Hannah. So today's session is called Cultivating Ideal Outcomes with Brand Strategy with Hannah Zachry, who is a nonprofit brand strategist from Say When Design Studio. Hannah is a trusted Hive partner, has multiple disciplinary creative, and has a certified brand strategist with a BFA in design. At Say When, Hannah designs brand identities, websites, and user experiences that move people, all from scratch with the skill set that's old enough to drive a car. Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you for that warm introduction and for facilitating. I'm excited to talk about this today just because I would agree. I think that it's really timely right now, and I've been getting a lot of questions from people about brand strategy. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my speaking notes too. So if you see me kind of reading that, that's what I'm doing. But I really felt like it was important that we started today's discussion with just a quick overview of what is a brand and what is a brand strategy. And not to be too pedantic, but there are just so many definitions out there. And ultimately, a brand is, it's a name, it's a term, a design, or a symbol, or any other feature that distinguishes one seller's goods from somebody else. And more importantly, it is about creating and storing value in the minds of your audience. Like that is the point of a brand. So no matter if you are a for-profit organization, a nonprofit organization, a charity, a foundation, an NGO, grassroots organization, however you're doing it, you've got a brand. And your goal is to create and store value in the minds of your audience so that you can then activate that value, whatever it is, so that they make a purchase, so that they volunteer, so that they donate money. Whatever that answer is fine. But that's the problem that we're really trying to solve is how do we create and how do we store that value? So that's really the crux of brand strategy. I'm going to go on to the next slide. And I want to talk about like what could this be? I think the better question is really to ask, what would it be if it was just a different facet or an expansion of your business strategy, your strategic plan, or your internal processes? What if your brand strategy is something that you're already doing? And to be honest, I think that for most people I interact with, they are already doing it. They're just using a different nomenclature, a different naming system, or a different framework. And sometimes it's scattered. Sometimes it's just the labels are different. Sometimes it's outdated, and sometimes it's irrelevant. But ultimately, a brand strategy comes from the people who run the organization. So if anybody is ever going to like come to me and like, yeah, here's a questionnaire, you just fill it out, we're going to give you your brand strategy. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be very good. It's not going to be very deep because you're going to get a lot of surface level answers from somebody who could not dig in deep and someone who isn't you because you run the business, whatever kind of business it is again, right? Whether it's nonprofit, for profit, you run it. And so that strategy is going to be based on you and your strengths. And over time, those are going to evolve as well. And only you're going to know when they evolve and how they evolve. So anytime you bring in a consultant or an agency or somebody else to do this work, I would really, really encourage you and remind you, like, it is collaborative and deeply, like, it's deep emotional work. And so anybody who puts like a quick label on it of like, let's do this quick and done for you, it's just usually not a good bet. I Over the years, I'm a little bit jaded. I've seen a lot of things. I've read a lot of things. You know, have multiple books next to me on brand. And a lot of the words on this screen, you're probably going to recognize, and you might even have these in your brand guidelines. There are just so many different ways to talk about and think about these things, like, whether you have a mission statement or a vision statement, or do you talk about your ethos? Do you talk about your values, like core values? Is it what are all of these things? And ultimately, you don't need any of these things. You don't. They all sound nice, but they are all labels, right? For what's important to you. You only need to define four things. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. And this is going to be the four things that you need to know: why you exist, who you are, what you do, and then finally, how you look, feel, and sound. And that's what I mean by this is not quick work, and only you can really know the answer to this. So when I facilitate a brand strategy session, these are the four questions that I'm setting out to answer fully enough, like for myself to understand what my clients are saying to me. But it's more important too that they're figuring it out, because that's often what I'm doing is I'm really just facilitating. I'm just there with the questions to help guide that understanding and that knowledge um, come together under one roof. And whether you decide to call it your brand strategy or your strategic plan or whatever name you want to give it, that'll be yours and it'll be custom to you. So number one, I do want to dive into these a little bit, you know. Oh, I'm not going to go too far into them, but step one, why you exist. A really good exercise for this is the Simon Sinek exercise, I believe, about the five whys, and uncovering your why, where you just keep going deeper and deeper and take it a level. Why do you exist? What problem are you here to solve? Like, and the more vulnerable you can be here, the more authentic you can be here, the better, because that's going to set you apart from other people. And then number two, who you are. This might be value alignment. This might be short descriptors, personas, or even demographic data. I think that all of that is really important to just be aware and have it documented somewhere. And then three, what you do. This is also about really digging into the details of things. Of okay, well, first we take this step, and then second we do this, and then third, and really digging into the details of the daily work, whether that is a program that you run as a nonprofit or a product that you create and then sell as a business owner. Or if you're a foundation and maybe you are reviewing grants. It's that foundational question of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So really digging into the ways and means in which you're doing it. One way I like to think of this section is rituals, and that's because I am obsessed with the game Control, and I'm very excited about Control 2 that's coming out later this year. But this idea of rituals and things that we're doing frequently, whether that's a daily process, a weekly, or maybe even a monthly, it's something that is defining part of who we are, because it's the actions that we're taking. And then finally, that last bucket, how you look, feel, and sound, right? Like this is the tough one. But remember, our goal is to create those associations in the minds of our audience about creating that value, storing that value. So if we take the answers to questions 1, 2, and 3, and we make them visual, and that becomes the language that you use, the words that you use, the steps that you always take, the way you present yourself all becomes very much the same thing. And it's that consistency of how you look, feel, and sound being defined that's really important. And sometimes this can be really difficult for folks who are not as comfortable with creative thinking and kind of making sort of those abstract relational types of things. let me be more specific. Okay. So, like, if, for example, you decide that you exist as the nonprofit hive to serve communities, and that as people, you are kind and welcoming. And three, what you do is provide a space for people to connect weekly. Four, how do you look, feel, and sound? Well, I'm going to be really honest with you, and I'm not just bragging on the nonprofit hive. Like, they're doing all of those things, right? The community and kind and compassionate and caring, and then the steps that they're taking, all of those come back into what they're putting out as a brand, what they're posting on social media, what their website looks like, the fonts and the colors that they choose to use. If there are photos, they're photos of the people in the community. Like, there are a lot of things that are really, really intentional about that brand and are so tied to who the nonprofit hive is. And I picked that as an example because, we can all be a little bit more familiar with that one. But these same things are true too when you look at larger brands. You people dissect the Apple brand all the time. There's, the Target brand. There are a lot of really good ones. One of my personal favorites is the Kleenex brand. It's so lame, but like, here we are, we're calling them Kleenex. It's a tissue, but we call it a brand name and not an object. And that says something about a brand and how they show up and how they look, sound, and feel. So I think that anybody can really take those same things. And if you've answered questions one, two, and three, you should be able to answer four. And if you're having trouble with answering number four, you might ask the creatives in your life of, hey, like, what does this look like to you? If, you know, we're all getting together and we're meeting every week, what might that look like? Is it screen grabs? Is it short videos like these AMA sessions being reposted and reshared? Is it right? Like, that makes sense that that is the answer for the nonprofit hive. And there are a thousand other ways that we can explore that and try to redefine what that looks like. But ultimately, if it doesn't support answers one, two, and three, then it shouldn't belong in number four. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. I know that that's a lot. And we're going to have lots of time for questions. This is kind of the next logical step for brand strategy. Because like I said, you could call it your strategic plan. You could call it your process docs, your business strategy. And you're probably doing some of that work already to understand who your people are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, right? I recommend reviewing all of these things at the same time that you're going to recommend, like, review all of those other things. And I sincerely hope for you that that is a monthly review, a quarterly, and a yearly review. Um, with any sort of living documentation, it's important that you revisit it often. And even if you're not making changes, to review it often. I think we see that a lot, like, with older board members on nonprofits, or older staff members, older coworkers who just get burnt out and they get tired and they forget. And so whenever you bring it in regularly at every level of your organization, whether you're 2 people or 10 or 50 or, even bigger than that, you've got to kind of find ways to bring that in and tie it back in and say, remember, this is who we are, this is why we exist, and this is what we're doing and how we're doing it. Okay, so let's stick to what we look, sound, and feel like. But you've kind of got to have that touchstone regularly. So highly recommend monthly, quarterly, yearly. There's some suggestions under there for, what you might be reviewing with any of those, but I think it's all so dependent on the brand that it would be hard to say these are the metrics that every business or brand should be measuring, because they're going to be different for you. I would imagine, the metrics that I tracked for say when versus the metrics that I track for different clients, those look quite different. And if we go back to our example of the nonprofit hive, some of those metrics might be number of attendees or number of people who attend more than 1 week in a row, right? Like, that might be an interesting number to track. So, but also making time and space to talk about what's working and what's not working, I think, is always important. Okay, I'm going to go on to the last slide. These are the three most important questions that I get. Not important questions. These are the most common questions I get. Sorry. Um, got some animals going on in the background here. The most common question that I get is, how long does all of this take? And I think I was on like a LinkedIn post last week about this exact same topic because it's just such a hot debate. But the truth is, you really can't define it. It's going to be different. It could take you, I don't know, I guess it could take you 2 minutes. It could take you 2 minutes to answer those four questions, but it could also take you 2 years. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is for a business. It's going to depend on the age, the size, um, and if there have been any significant changes, with administration changes, just the political, social climate that we're in. I know that there are many nonprofit organizations that are currently going through these changes of feeling like we have to shift the way that we're presenting ourselves so that we don't lose funding, so that we aren't targeted, so that we aren't threatened. And one, that sucks. But two, you know, if that is the approach, make sure you're doing it right. But two, like that's going to take some time. Like you just can't expect that to happen overnight. In general, I would set aside at least a week and a couple hours each day to kind of do this stuff like iteratively. And I do think having multiple people involved in the process, if you are a larger organization, is really important. So if you're a nonprofit and you're going to approach the strategy session, you'll want to gather input from all of your people. And that might include people who are program participants or volunteers or board members or legacy gift donors. Like there might be these different kind of levels and different approaches that you start to set up and maintain. But that's going to be dependent on you, right? So hard to say. The second question that I get all the time is what if we just skipped it? What would happen? What if we just did no brand strategy? And the easiest way for me to answer that is just probably nothing. It'll probably be fine, but it is like going on a road trip without a map. You'll get somewhere. I don't know where you'll get, but you're going to go somewhere. You'll move. Will you know where you're going? Maybe. I don't know. But that's kind of like running a brand without a brand strategy. Is That's how it feels. So if you currently feel like you're on a road trip without a map, I would recommend going back to those four questions and trying to really nail down some answers there. And if you end up putting words around it like, oh, these are our brand personas, this is our brand position, this is our brand promise, our brand values, whatever you want to call it, if you've set up different pieces that are important to you and documented them, then that's your brand strategy. Um, yeah. The last question, how will I know if or when we have a good strategy? It's so cheesy, but it'll just feel right. It will. The more research you do about it, the more you like really dig in and start to go beyond the surface level of, well, we just want to make the world a better place, or whatever your mission might be. And I think if you can go beyond that and really dig deeper, then you're gonna know that you've got a right strategy, that you've got a good strategy too, because it'll be authentic to you and your brand. Okay, I think that's it. That's all the slides I have. Yeah,
That was brilliant. Super helpful, Hannah. Thank you so much. And I
you're
think there's
welcome.
a lot that people are probably already mapping out in their own organizations, their websites, the messaging, even board conversations, all of it. I can see it across the board. So I'm
Yeah,
going to pull in a few questions that came through during registration because there were some pretty consistent themes across the board. So I wanted to start with something that came up a few times, and I think a lot of people are wondering. You touched on it, but I'm curious. When you say when a nonprofit is just starting out, what actually matters most in building a strong brand?
yeah. I would say consistency and clarity is really important. I know that when you're just starting out, it's a lot to explore, right? If you're on that map or you're just in the car and you're just driving, you're just moving, you don't have a map. It is important to explore, right? And see like where could this go? Where could this lead us? But at the same time, I think that once you start feeling like this thing is working, then double down on it and really start being consistent. The biggest mistake that I see younger brands make is that they step outside of their box because they get bored and they get tired of waiting. And it does feel like, oh, I've posted the same thing like 20 times. I've used this font on everything. I'm so tired of this color. I've used this photo like 40 times, whatever it might be. But it's that kind of consistency that, like, people seeing that same photo, the same colors, the same motifs, all of it is what builds your brand. That is creating and storing value because it's the thing that people are continually interacting with. And so as long as you're consistent in whatever way it is, it doesn't even need to be creative. As long as you're consistent, like, that's what matters.
And I think, like, not everyone's going to see everything you post. They
Yeah,
need that
100%.
consistent, like,
Yeah, and I don't know if you've heard
storyline.
that before, like, for every, I don't know, like 7 posts or whatever, you have somebody every 7 posts you put out there, only, like, a person's gonna see one of them.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm butchering that statistic, but it is true. Like, by the time you are sick of it, that is when people are starting to notice it, and they're not sick of it. So truly just keep going. I promise you, nobody cares, nobody's bored but you. So just keep doing it. Keep doing it.
It's funny. It's true though. I feel that across all the
Yeah.
brands that I've ever been part of. It's a real feeling. So there's also so much pressure, obviously, to post, email, update your website, create video, show up on LinkedIn, and somehow be memorable. So I'm curious, how can nonprofits cut through the digital clutter without trying to be everywhere all the time
Yeah.
and burning their teams
Yeah.
out?
I think um yeah, I think a good place to start is just to ask, like, where are your people already? Like, we've been kind of talking about the nonprofit hive. It feels like a good example. And if I was to give anybody free brand strategy, it'd be the nonprofit hive. No, I think that it is a matter of going where your people already are. If your people are already using WhatsApp and maybe you've got a whole community there, like, go ahead and activate it. If people are already on Facebook, go ahead and activate it, but and then set aside all of those other platforms that people say, oh, you need to be on this. So if you don't have an Instagram account, you're not legitimate and people won't believe you're real. That's not true. I mean, it used to be, but it's not anymore. I think that in today's world, like, you should just go wherever your people are because they're going to be the ones who are engaging with you, and you're going to struggle everywhere else and it'll be overwhelming. Whereas it might just be fun if you create community where your community already is. If that makes
Yeah,
sense. I hope that makes
that
sense.
makes complete sense. And I feel that's if you're not showing up to where your community is, like, you're missing the opportunity to listen to what they're saying, getting their insights. Like, it feels like totally missed opportunity or missed mark if you're talking on Instagram and you're basically just talking to the void because no one that you actually want to engage with is there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that, there is something to be said about engagement. There are some brands where they've got, really high engagement, maybe on their people side, but maybe on the business side, it only gets, it gets a fraction of the engagement, whatever those numbers are. Um, and that's just true for business profiles compared to personal profiles. No matter what
Mhm.
platform you're on, they're always going to be more of a higher priority. But, as we've seen, the algorithm can change and all the things. So the better thing is just not to depend on the algorithm and
Yeah.
just say, I don't care, because it is, there's a lot of clutter out there and there are a lot of ways that you can show up. And I think that people treat social media and all these channels like the end all be all, but, like, there are other ways that you can advertise your brand and create and store value in the minds of your audience. It does not need to be a social media post every time. It can be a direct mailer, it could be email list, it could be, something that you are actually going out and putting flyers on doors,
Mhm.
or on parking lots. You see that on windshields, but things like that are effective. They do cost money, um, but they're really effective.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think it just ties back to the importance of being consistent, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So, this question, we had a few people asking about donors. And with the tougher kind of giving environment, I'm curious, how can brand strategy help people understand trust, support, and your work? And you've highlighted a little bit, just especially with your 4 questions, but I'm curious, how can you convey some of that as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely the consistency, right? Like when we see a break in consistency, it leads to doubt, but also it's like you keep putting money, like, okay, if we're creating and storing value in the minds of our audience and we're putting little coins into a treasure chest, and that's what it is, we're creating and storing the value. Like each time you get distracted by a new campaign, a new program, or making a small pivot or a small change, you are diverting and like throwing that money away. It's not going in the chest. So consistency truly is like it is so simple, but it's not easy. Like don't mishear me, it's not easy to be consistent. Sometimes it's that inner dialogue and that imposter syndrome that's getting the better of us. But yeah, it really is just clarity. I think that there are some signals, like having an active and accessible website with a privacy policy. If you've got a cookie disclaimer, there are things like that that tell us as viewers that this is a reputable site. If I go to visit your website and I can't find information about who you are, then I'm probably going to stop right there. Like if I can't figure out who even started this brand, I'm not going to support it. And that's a personal choice that I make, right? But I think that when we approach this problem of how do we help people understand and trust and support this work, it does start there. It's making sure that all of your ducks are in a row. And if you don't have a professional, accessible website, and by that, I really do just mean that you've got a privacy policy, you've got a copyright down there, you've got your EIN present if you're a nonprofit, you've got a contact page, an about page, those things that credibility, like they flag credibility in our minds, right? Of this is a real business and I can trust it. Um, Whether I'm donating my money or I'm buying a product or signing up for a program.
That makes a lot of sense. And we had a very specific question, but I'm going to ask it because it ties very much into this question as well. And
Mhm.
it's probably quite similar, I'm assuming, a response. But it's how can nonprofits build credibility with funders, corporate partners, CSR teams, ERGs when they're still small or new? And I think that's kind of the nuance of this question. But is there anything else that you would add around that trust and the website component that you just shared?
Yeah, yeah. Um, there's, all of those technical markers, but then there are the social proof markers. Having testimonials or reviews or quotes from people who are in your community that are supporting what you're doing, talking about what you're doing. Um, I think that folks always find that really inviting, and that is a marker of trust, right? When you can say it's not just me saying, hey, you should trust me, it's other people saying this is why we trust them. That makes a big difference. So looking for ways to collect that feedback, but also looking for ways to collect data. um, Corporate partners, CSR teams, ERGs, yeah, they all really want to see the impact data, and they want to know, why does this matter? And sometimes that impact data is easy to collect and it's part of your program anyways, but other times it's not. And it's like, oh, we have to figure out, how do we collect data? How do we prove impact for something like, oh, we offer mental health support? How do you prove that that's effective? Um, well, the answer for that is, when you have really emotional problems and really like intangible things, is to assign it a quantitative number. And so you would then say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you feel before this interaction? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you feel after? And so now you have a number to work with, and you can create not necessarily like a story from it, but you're collecting information that's very real, and it is telling a story if you're there to listen to it.
Yeah, that's
So,
brilliant. And I think sometimes getting that information is part of the challenge, but then it's also conveying that message in a compelling way that aligns with your broader community, but then your specific CSR teams or your funder. And I think that sometimes is the challenge. I used to work for an organizations where we did big thought leadership pieces, and conveying that to the broader audience was often the challenge. And
Mm,
I think
yeah.
I'd love to hear more on like how you think you can pull bite-sized information to the greater audience to help tell that story.
I'm so glad you asked this question. Um, I love information design. It's so fun.
Fun.
Give me packets of data and I will create some charts and graphs. It's just fun. I think that when you say to somebody, we raise, I don't know, $1,000, and you go, great, we raised $1,000. Doesn't say the same thing as saying, oh, we raised enough to purchase XYZ. And now, because of that purchase, we're going to do ABCD. That is more of an outcome related, like association. So like taking all of that data that you collect, and collect it early, collect it often, but taking that data and really listening to the story that it's telling you, and then making that tangible for others. So the reason I bring up the numerical based one is that numbers are often meaningless to us. We cannot
Mhm,
envision 1,000 $1 bills. Who can do that? I don't know. I mean, if I try, it's probably like Magic Mike and it's like a strip, scene, and it's like a lot of fun. But like that's the only way I can physically imagine $1,000. It doesn't mean anything to me. And so you have
mhm.
to make the data points mean something to people. And that is where knowing who you're talking to is really important. Because if you are trying to take this data and say, well, we want to present this to parents so that they feel safe enrolling their kids in our program. But we've also got the CSR team over here and they're interested in this data too. You're probably going to present that data a little bit differently because the parent is concerned probably with safety. The CSR team is concerned with, responsibility and accountability. And so while there's a lot of overlaps, how you might present it is going to start to be different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there's obviously Marcom teams who understand the branding. They understand the need. Everything comes through them, so they have a way to kind of finesse the message to fit into brand. But they may struggle getting their leadership, their programs, their fundraisers, their board on the same process. So I'm
Mm.
curious, how do you get internal buy-in for brand strategy when not everyone sees it in their strategic work?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kind of like I said earlier, you can call it whatever you want. Um, I do think that sometimes people hear brand strategy or design and they go, oh, yeah, that's just like art and colors, and we're just going to pick some cool fonts. And sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that is what it is. But at the end of the day, what brand strategy does for you is that it aligns your team internally and it aligns your audience externally so that you can achieve the goals that you've set out to achieve. That's it. It's really that simple. And so I think that the question is really just, well, do you want to achieve these goals? Do you want to be aligned with our internal team and do you want to be aligned with our audience on the external? Then okay, yes, let's do it. I do think that when it comes to nonprofits and board approval and those sorts of things, brand strategy can often fall into the operational costs or the marketing bucket. It can be considered a lot of things. And one of the biggest benefits I would say that you get from brand strategy, having been through it at an agency level, um, with about 30 people, it is truly a team aligner. It's really about getting people on board and excited about what they're doing because like yeah, obviously they were interested before because that's why they're there, but this is about keeping people excited all the time. How do you help an employee who's been there for 7 years get excited about it again? Well, like doing some brand strategy work.
It almost feels like culture work too, then maybe. because you get
It
to
is.
ask that feedback.
Yes, that is a beautiful way of putting that. Much more succinct than I was going for. But yes,
You
that
got
is
me
what I'm
there.
trying to say. Like it's the alignment. It's the alignment
Yeah,
piece.
that makes a lot of sense, and you totally got me through that space together. So, I think it also ties in, though, to all the programs that nonprofits are constantly managing, hosting, putting there's so many different connected organizations even or multiple audiences and the programs, and I'm trying to get a sense of how to simplify that a little bit. So one of the questions that came in was around how do you simplify a brand when there are multiple connected programs, initiatives, or organizations?
Mm, yeah, this one's hard because it's probably a really unique answer. Um,
It's fair.
it's an information architecture question, and I think when it comes to a nonprofit with multiple connected programs, I'm thinking of one here in the city that has multiple connected programs. There's an organization called the Curbside Chronicle. They work with folks experiencing like housing instability, and they put together a periodical, and then they people can sell it, make a little bit of money, earn their way forward. And now they have a flower shop, and they're about to open a what was it? It was a third enterprise that was totally unrelated, and I'm going to remember it later. But it was interesting because I was like, "Oh, hell yeah." Like because it's curbside, it wasn't a pizza shop, but like curbside pizza shop, I got excited about it and I literally was like, "Oh, yeah, like that's something that I'm going to pay attention to because it is utilizing the brand that I already know and like." And so that's just I guess one example of an expansion. Really the things that they kept were the name. They both had a similar name, so Curbside Chronicle, Curbside Flowers, Curbside Pizza Shop again. And then they all have like the same sort of logo. Like the bottom
Correct.
piece where the word is different looks different, but they all have the same sort of lockup. So it's creating a lot of consistency across those brands. I would say one of the easiest ways to store value, create and store value in the minds of your audience is to use color. Color is one of the most influential aspects in a designer's toolkit, and it's really culturally specific. What colors mean in different parts of the country and different parts of the world is going to be a little bit different. So it takes a little bit of research. But I would say if you have multiple brands, and even if they are just connected linearly and they don't necessarily have an overarching like parent brand, even still, I would unify them all with color. So whatever that color is, if you're the nonprofit hive, it's yellow, right? So we're gonna put yellow everywhere, and it's gonna be the same yellow. You might
Mhm.
build on it in different ways. Maybe one of your brands has yellow and orange and red, and maybe one has yellow and green and like a brown. Like it could be totally different and have a different mood and a different feeling, but they can still be correlated because they're using a shared visual language, whether that's the color, the font, the motifs, the photo treatment style, the logo itself could be the same, or the mark that you're using in your system could be the same. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of ways to do it.
I think color I I'm kind of creative. I am creative, but it's not the average. I don't think. It's not like how I'm not an artist. I am not a good designer, but I love creating stuff that's already in the world, I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
And color is always something that draws my attention, color and feel. And I think that
Hmm.
that aligns really well with how I get excited about my creative work, even though it has nothing to do with branded design. That's definitely a Tosh thing. But I really like where you're going with that. And I think there's something around so we've talked a lot about the theories and how to implement and what you should or shouldn't be doing, but I think a lot of people forget how much time and energy and team capacity this actually takes. So I'm wondering, If it's a small shop or a small marketing team, where should nonprofits focus their brand energy so they strengthen the brand instead of diluting it? Or if they only have so much time to put in X amount of effort, where should they focus?
Yeah. Yeah. I think um, if you are thinking about it like that, of, we've got maybe you've got 10 or 15 hours every month to focus on brand and marketing. And maybe it does feel like those hours are very limited. I would say focusing them, one, on where your people are,
Mhm.
um, but then also on your actual people, like who's running the brand, because the brand is just a representative of you, of the people you serve. So I would focus on them. And if you don't have a lot of resources, you know, I don't think that is always a limitation. I think that sometimes that can allow us to creatively solve problems in new ways. Um, so I would encourage you to not necessarily think about like a lack of something as a limitation, but maybe as a boundary, and more of like, these are our fence posts that we're going to stake in the ground, and we're going to operate within this section of fence because this is what we're comfortable and capable of doing. Um, and that could be time, money, energy, knowledge, perspective, determination, or desire, to actually complete something. But I think if you feel like you really have to focus your energy, I would put it on where your people already are. And on your people themselves, like asking them what makes sense and what is authentic. Um, because I think that there are so many missed opportunities, and the desire to meet the stereotypical, we show up on social media twice a week. We do this as a brand. We send out a monthly email newsletter. We do XYZ. We do all of these things, and they're all the right things based on whatever, right? I think that you could go that route. Or you could let your people define what your marketing strategy is, what your branding strategy is, how you put yourself out there, because that is ultimately like the purpose of it, is right, the creating and the storing of value. So
Mhm.
sorry for a long-winded answer. I hope that
It's
helped.
brilliant and beautiful because you should be focusing on your people. I love the authenticity of that. I love that, realities, trends, political dynamics, everything can shift your audience's perspective, um,
Mhm.
values, or their current realities that they're facing. And if you're not in touch with that, I think it can lessen your brand and it can lessen your
Oh,
impact.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that, like, it's just a really nice way to make sure that, not it's nice, it's a needed way to make sure that you're actually in tune with who you're serving.
Yeah, because otherwise you might just go on autopilot and go, well, this is the post, and this is the method, this is the email, this is the direct mail template that we use every time. It has this sort of return envelope in it, and this is the language we use. And I think whenever you stop questioning that and you just get so focused on the rote
Mhm.
action of doing it over and over, is when people start to feel like, what is the purpose in this? Is
Yeah.
this really, if it starts to feel like your energy isn't being used well? And if instead you can take that step back and go, well, where are our people actually showing up? How can we actually reach them? Is the answer posting on social media twice a week? If so, why is that the answer? Do we
Yeah.
have a why? And which platform are we posting on? How? Like then you start to answer that question, rather than kind of going the opposite way of, we just don't have time to do all these things and we're not experts. But
Yeah.
the truth is that, like, that it's a myth that you have to do all these things, because you don't.
You really don't. And you don't wanna be tone deaf. I think that, like, is the one thing. If as soon as you
Yes.
start losing the path, or like losing the through line, that's slightly where you start diluting your message too, and people get confused and don't understand what
Yeah.
what the
I
purpose is,
mean,
like you said.
Yeah, like that's how you're gonna honestly destroy some of that brand equity. That's not putting a coin in the chest. That's like throwing it away, right? Because if you stop paying attention to what your people care about, and because you haven't made space for that, and that's not part of your brand strategy process, like yeah, you'll end up out of sync, and you're gonna go off on different paths, and that's where you lose, audience members. Maybe you keep finding new ones, but maybe you keep losing them too.
Yeah.
I see that happen
Yeah.
a lot.
I can imagine. And it's not easy right now either. It's just the current climate
Yeah.
makes it even more tricky. Hannah, that was super helpful. And I just appreciate you so much.
Glad.
Thank you so much for helping us think through brand strategy as something much more than visuals. I think it is that bigger picture. And it's more of like a tool for clarity, trust, alignment, and helping you make better decisions. So thank you so much for tying that all up so
Um,
nicely. For everyone here, I hope this gives you a few things to think about, whether you're starting from scratch, trying to clean up a scattered brand, or building internal buy in. I hope this was a helpful conversation for you. Again, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and brilliance. This feels very practical and very human. So thank you. That's very on brand for the Nonprofit Hive. So appreciate you staying there with us. And to
yeah.
everyone, thank you so much for showing up, asking thoughtful questions. All of these questions were from the audience themselves. So I hope we did get to answer everyone's questions that had submitted some. And then, yeah, for helping, just joining us in the messiness of what the Nonprofit Hive is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I look forward to seeing you at the next AMA. And Hannah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, glad to do this. And I really appreciate you facilitating, and really grateful for the nonprofit hive and the space that it creates and protects.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right.